Welcome to the deep dive. All right, let's get right into it. We're asking, how can a government, one that actually issues its own currency, best manage its economy? So it works for everyone. Because if the big hurdle isn't just finding the money, then what really is the limiting factor?
Yeah, that's a fundamental question, isn't it? And it brings us right to today's topic, fiscal policy. Government spending and taxing, but seen through the lens of modern monetary theory, or MMT.
Exactly. We've been looking at some great material from the MMT Unplugged podcast series, specifically their piece on fiscal policy for full employment and price stability. And our mission, really, for you listening, is to get a handle on MMT's take on the main goals here. Full employment, stable prices, and importantly, the tools they think can get us there.
Right. And central to all this, really foundational, is an idea called functional finance. It's originally from Abba Lerner, and it basically flips the script. It says, look, judge fiscal policy by its results in the real world, not by some arbitrary rule like, oh, is the budget balanced, is the debt low?
Okay, functional finance. Let's unpack that. So you're saying instead of worrying about whether the government's books show a deficit or a surplus, MMT asks, well, what's actually happening? Are people finding jobs? Are prices stable? It's about the outcomes, right?
That's exactly it. The deficit or surplus, those are just results.
Yeah.
They're consequences, maybe, of pursuing the real goals.
Yeah.
Full employment and price stability. It's a totally different perspective on government finance.
Okay, so let's take one of those outcomes, unemployment. How does MFT explain why people are out of work when they want a job?
Well, MMT sees unemployment fundamentally as a signal, a sign that there isn't enough net government spending in the economy.
Net spending. Remind us what that means.
Sure. It's simply the total amount the government spends in the economy minus the total amount of taxes back out, the difference.
Right. So how does too little of that net spending lead to unemployment? What's the mechanism there?
Think about it this way. The government issues. The private sector, people, businesses, they need it. First, to pay their taxes. That's a requirement.
Okay.
But they might also want to save some of that currency. It's a financial asset for them. Now, if the government isn't injecting enough currency, net, after taxes, well, there might not be enough to cover both the tax obligations and everyone's desire to save.
Ah, so a sort of shortage.
Kind of. It leads to a shortfall in overall income. People can't buy as much. Businesses don't need as many workers. And, well, you get unemployment.
That makes a lot of sense. So if the problem is basically insufficient government spending, net, the MMT solution seems, well, fairly straightforward.
It is, in principle.
Yeah.
The government, as the currency issuer, has the power to fix this. It can increase its net spending. And it can do that basically two ways. Either spend more directly banks, infrastructure, schools, green energy projects.
Things with clear public benefit?
Exactly. Or it can cut taxes, leaving more money in the hands of people and businesses. Both increase that net flow of currency into the private sector.
Okay, and that brings us neatly to one of MMT's flagship ideas, doesn't it? The job guarantee.
Absolutely. The JG, sometimes called the employer of last resort, it's really a central piece of the MMT policy framework for achieving genuine full employment.
So what's the core idea? How does it work?
The basic mechanism is this. The government makes an open-ended offer of a job at a defined basic living wage plus benefits to anyone who is ready and willing to work but can't find a job in the private sector.
A job for anyone who wants one but can't find one? That sounds like a very direct solution to involuntary unemployment.
That's the primary goal, yes. It effectively puts a floor under the labor market, ensuring that anyone who wants to contribute can do so. It aims to eliminate that pool of people forced into unemployment.
And I've heard it described as an automatic stabilizer. How does that work? What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, that's a really key feature. It works countercyclically, automatically. So think about when the private economy is doing well, booming maybe.
Okay.
Businesses are hiring. They'll likely offer better wages or conditions than the basic JG job. So they'll pull workers out of the JG program.
Right, so JG enrollment goes down automatically.
And government spending on the JG goes down too. It naturally shrinks. But when the private sector slows down, layoffs happen.
People lose their jobs.
They have somewhere to go. They can take up a JG job. So enrollment automatically increases and government spending on the program rises, providing income support and boosting overall demand exactly when it's needed most.
So it pushes against the economic cycle, smoothing things out.
Precisely. Without needing new legislation each time the economy turns. It's built in.
Okay, now this next part I find fascinating. MMT folks argue the job guarantee isn't just about jobs, it's also key to price stability. How on earth does guaranteeing jobs help control inflation? Seems counterintuitive.
It does seem that way at first glance, based on older models, but it's actually a crucial part of the design. The key is the fixed wage offered in the Job Guarantee Program. This wage acts as a sort of anchor for the whole wage structure in the economy, a nominal anchor.
An anchor. How so?
Well, think about it. During an economic boom, the government isn't out there competing with private firms by bidding up wages to hire people. It's just offering this stable baseline JG wage. So it avoids adding fuel to wage price spirals during good times. The JG wage sets a floor, not a ceiling. Private wages will generally be above it, but that floor helps prevent wages from just taking off uncontrollably.
Okay. So it dampens wage pressures during booms.
Exactly. Warren Mosler, one of the key MMT figures, often describes the JG wage as the defining factor for the value of the currency in a way, instead of the traditional approach, which uses a buffer stock of unemployed people to try and control inflation.
Which is pretty brutal when you think about it.
It is. MMT proposes using a buffer stock of employed people in the JG program, paid a stable wage. It flips that awful trade-off between unemployment and inflation.
Using employment to stabilize prices, not unemployment. That is a radical shift. What kinds of jobs would people do in a JG program?
The idea is to focus on socially useful work. Things that, benefit the community or the environment, but maybe aren't profitable for the private sector. So you could have projects like cleaning up local parks, environmental restoration, assisting in elder care, maybe supporting community arts programs, valuable work that enhances public well-being.
Got it. So, besides the job guarantee, which is obviously huge, what other fiscal tools does MMT emphasize?
Well, general government spending on public purposes is still vital. Infrastructure, education, R&D, all that good stuff. But the MMT perspective shifts the decision-making criteria. It's less about can we afford this in a purely monetary sense and more about do we have the real resources, the people, the materials, the capacity to do this effectively without causing inflation.
So, the bottleneck isn't the government's bank account, it's the real economy's capacity.
Exactly. If you hear about a bridge not being repaired because of lack of funds, MMT would say, wait, do we lack engineers? Do we lack concrete? Or do we just lack political will based on a misunderstanding of how the money works?
Interesting distinction. And taxes. We usually think of them as funding spending, but MMT sees them differently, right?
Very differently. Since a currency-issuing government doesn't need tax revenue before it can spend, taxes serve other crucial purposes. Primarily, taxes are about managing aggregate demand, total spending power in the economy.
How so?
If the economy is overheating, maybe inflation is picking up, you can raise taxes. That takes spending power out of the economy to cool things down.
Okay.
Conversely, if the economy is sluggish, unemployment is high, you can cut taxes. That leaves more money in people's pockets, hopefully encouraging them to spend and boosting demand.
So, taxes are like a thermostat for the economy's temperature.
That's a good way to put it. Less like the government's income, more like a control lever for demand.
And can they be used for other things too, beyond just managing demand?
Oh, absolutely. Taxes are powerful tools for social and environmental goals. Progressive income taxes to reduce inequality, for example, or carbon taxes to discourage pollution. The source material we looked at even mentioned specific ideas like a temporary payroll tax holiday during a recession to give workers an immediate boost, or revenue sharing with state governments so they don't have to slash services during downturns.
This really reframes the whole idea of affordability, doesn't it, when talking about government action?
It completely does. That's maybe the biggest mental hurdle for people encountering MMT for the first time. For a government that issues its own currency, like the US, UK, Japan, Canada, affordability isn't like a household budget. A household has to find the money first.
But the government.
The government, the issuer of the currency, can always create the money needed to pay for things denominated in that currency. It can't run out of its own money, financially speaking.
So, if the financial constraint isn't the main issue, what are the real constraints?
The real limits are, well, real. It comes down to, do we have the available labor, the skills, the raw materials, the factories, the technology to actually produce the goods and services we want the government to provide or facilitate?
So, real resources.
Exactly. And crucially, will mobilizing those resources through government spending push total demand beyond the economy's productive capacity? Because that's when you get inflation. If you try to buy more than the economy can actually make.
So, if resources, like people who want to work, are sitting idle,
Then the real cost of putting them to work is actually very low. You're using resources that were previously wasted. It's not about the dollars. It's about the stuff and the people.
okay, let's try and pull this together for everyone listening. What are the absolute key takeaways from this MMT view on fiscal policy?
Okay, first big one. Fiscal policy spending and taxing is the main game in town for managing the economy. And we should judge it by its outcomes, like Lerner's functional finance says. Does it work in the real world?
Right, outcomes, not deficits.
Second, full employment and price stability. They're not mutually exclusive pipe dreams. MMT argues they are achievable goals using fiscal policy intelligently.
And the job guarantee is central to that.
That's the third point. The JG is presented as a crucial tool, maybe the crucial tool, for hitting both targets, directly ending involuntary unemployment and anchoring price stability via that stable JG wage.
Got it. And finally,
Finally, we need to rethink affordability for a currency-issuing government. The real questions are about real resources and inflation risk, not just finding the money or balancing the books in an accounting sense. It's about economic responsibility managing resources. Well, not just, old-fashioned fiscal bookkeeping responsibility.
Yeah.
Big difference.
it really is a profound shift in perspective. Definitely gives me, and I hope you listening, a huge amount to think about regarding government's role and potential. It poses that question, doesn't it? If the limits aren't primarily financial, what are the real debates we should be having about what our government prioritizes and what kind of economy we want to build? Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.